So Hazami, tell us, how involved are you in youth-related issues around the world?
Well, myself, I'm a social entrepreneur and I would consider myself a youth advocate. I live in Washington, D.C. and I've been working for many years on trying to identify channels by where you can harness potentials of youth and mainstream their initiatives and their efforts. One of the biggest challenges that we have as youth, I'm from the Middle East, North Africa, originally from Syrian, Palestinian and Syrian. One of the biggest challenges that we find is that youth are not mainstreamed. What we're trying to do is really mainstream youth initiatives to where they do impact policy, they engage civil society, but also they engage the private sector and businesses and corporations, and really creating more outlets to have sustainable impact. And ultimately looking at the youth agenda not as a side agenda, but as a mainstream agenda that is crucial and central to development initiatives for countries as a whole.
So now you have been in Sri Lanka for a couple of days. How do you find your stay, and do you think there is a conducive environment in Sri Lanka for the youth and to issue the concerns of the youth to the policymakers?
I've been in Sri Lanka actually for only a day, but I would say first impression, it's a beautiful country, very hospitable, people are very, very kind. I would say out of all the conferences that I attend internationally, which is a fair bit, the most impactful conferences I find are the ones that are actually held in emerging markets and in developing markets, because you're able to hear voices of youth in their environment and not necessarily removed from their environment. I think that adds so much depth and quality to the conversation and the discourse when you're able to actually have youth on a local level engaging. I applaud all of the amazing sponsors for walking the walk and putting their money where their mouth is, and I applaud all the youth for stepping up and advocating for their causes and initiatives.
How do you feel? Are there any lessons that you can learn, or are there any lessons at large for the youth that they could learn from Sri Lanka, having been walked out of a 3-decade-long war? Is there anything that particularly the youth could gain, or the countries who are in a conflict situation could gain from Sri Lanka's experience?
I think I'm actually from Syria, so half Syrian, half Palestinian, and so you're finding that a lot of youth are, their wishes are falling on deaf ears. The reason that the revolution started was that youth wanted to be heard. They wanted to live a life of integrity, of dignity, of freedom in all the meanings of the way. They wanted access to resources and that sort of thing. What has happened now, very unfortunately, is that it has become so politicized and so violent, and the voices of the people that started the revolution we no longer hear. I think one of the big lessons that we can learn from countries that have gone through this is how do youth emerge from conflict as constructive members of their society? How do you overcome the psychological and sociological challenges that we have as a community? So I think the big challenge that we have ahead of us is really creating avenues for successful civil society engagement, mobilizing youth in a constructive way to advocate for their desires, and shifting away from violent engagement to more constructive engagement, which is very hard to do amidst conflict. But I think there are a lot of lessons learned that we could collaborate with different countries that have gone through this, learn from your youth, engage with your youth, and create rehabilitation programs for our youth.
And many thanks for joining Face On once again.
Thank you so much for having me.